As Sally mentioned, I'm Mark, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present here today. At StoreGene, we are on a mission to make genomics affordable, accessible, and actionable for every single human on the planet. And we've developed a high-quality sequencing service that's centered around the individual and with a transparent data management platform. This is for them to manage their whole genome data, entire data set, all 22,000 genes, 90 gigabytes that makes you you. Now, this is delivered through a self-request model to fulfill our tenets of accessibility, actionability, and affordability. And today I want to talk through the journey that we had at StoreGene to derive on the self-request model. And we believe that industry can be a powerful force to drive the transparency, engagement, and trust needed to deliver population genomics and the world's ambitions in genetic medicine. And let's be clear, this ambition is huge. Nearly every single country in the world will have some kind of genetic testing program. There's the ones you've probably heard of, all of us in the US, Genomics England, here in the UK, the Emirati Genome Program, the Saudi Genome Program, that are systematically sequencing entire populations' whole genome data. There's also countries, war-torn countries like Ukraine, have set off on a genetic testing program last year where they're testing 12,000 individuals to understand more about type 1 diabetes within their populations. So genetics is starting to move out of just a niche research activity, but into clinical mainstream use. And the UK is no different in its ambition within this space. We've got a rich history in genetics, being the place where the structure of DNA was first discovered in 1953. We were a major contributor to the first draft of the human genome being published in 2004. And we set off on the world's first moonshot genome sequencing project, Genomics England, back in 2012. Now, this ambition has been built on within Fit for the Future, the latest NHS policy doc published last year. Genomics was mentioned 126 times within a 130-page document, and it's been centered as one of the NHS's big bets for technology that will drive transformation in healthcare. It's also set out the plans to do two major projects. First, to offer every single person turning 40 as part of a routine health assessment whole genome sequencing. And every newborn baby, 600,000 each year, whole genome sequencing at the point of birth. So if globally we started moving genomics from niche research activity to clinical use, arguably here in the UK, we're moving beyond clinical use into population genomics. And for this to work, we really need transparency, trust, and engagement from populations. So as mentioned, I believe that industry can be a powerful force to deliver this ambition, population genomics. And just a bit of history of StoreGene is we spun out of University College London back in 2004, led by Professor Steve Humphreys and Dr. Dan Brown. Now, Steve is one of the world's leading authorities within familial hypercholesterolemia and cardiovascular genetics, and Dan is UCL's computer sciences entrepreneur in residence. Now, they came together to commercialize Steve's research back in 2004, just when the first draft of the human genome was being published. And that set out the scene for his research within familial hypercholesterolemia and polygenic risk scoring, looking at multiple positions across the genome and their contribution to risk of common disorders and cardiovascular disease, which led to them developing a laboratory genetics service that was being used within the private sector within HCA and Nuffield Health. So a very clinically focused model. Now, I first got in contact with StoreGene back in 2012 when I was a student under Steve studying pharmacogenomics. I went on my own path to understand how to integrate genetic data into prescribing pathways to make sure that we could reduce the burden of adverse drug reactions within health systems. And even by 2012 and 2004, the technology of genome sequencing had transformed radically. Next generation sequencing had just come on board, and we've been able to now sequence genomes for a factor of 1,000 times less than the first human genome problem in 2004. So what was first set up as a clinical system and genetic testing and laboratory problem with Dan and Steve has fast been starting to move into a data problem on how we can start storing genome data and really generating all that information from them. So with my experience within pharmacogenomics, it took me deep into data healthcare and how data flows without the NHS. And It was that I worked at a company called DrDoctor that do patient engagement systems for patient administration systems. And so it's that learning on how we can bring genomics into this data world that I joined StoreGene in 2020 to deliver in the cardiovascular genetics world. COVID happened, so nobody was talking about cardiovascular genetics whatsoever. So we decided to really assess what is the future looking like in genetics. And that's where we developed the whole genome sequencing service, which at that point in time, we were able to sequence a genome for under £1,000. So it would come down another factor of £1,000 in the cost of sequencing genomes. So we developed the platform and the whole genome sequencing service, but we really wanted to know what model would be the most effective to fulfill our tenets of actionability, affordability, and accessibility. So we looked at the clinical model and direct-to-consumer model to really guide what are we going to be doing in StoreGene, and we assessed it against our tenets. If we look at accessibility, it's how many people can access that technology. Actionability is utility. And this isn't just in a clinical sense on clinically how someone can use the data to drive better health outcomes, but it's also how can they use it in their lifestyle to understand their place in the world and understand wellness and lifestyle changes that they can make. And then affordability, which is a proxy for cost effectiveness, where we look at not just the cost of the test right then, but the cost over an individual's lifetime, and also how that could impact or burden health systems to make sure a proxy for affordability. So when we looked at the clinical genetics world, it was something that we knew well, and it's something that we all know well in the UK, is it's the primary model that we're using to deliver genetic testing. It's very clinically led, it's embedded in healthcare, and it's usually quite indication-based. So an example of this is familial hypercholesterolemia. The cardiologist sees someone with high cholesterol levels and a family history of heart disease. They would want to know whether that individual has a genetic driver that could be causing disrupting the processes to break down bad cholesterol, leading to this high cholesterol levels, putting them at risk of heart disease. With that information, they can then guide the severity of the intervention, be it lifestyle advice, statins, or even apheresis to clean the blood of bad cholesterol, and also guide testing for family members to pick up their risk early on. So this is very actionable. There's a definite endpoint that the clinician can make and the individual can make based on the genetic test that's made. But when it comes to accessibility, this can be very narrow, as it's based on whether people fit strict criteria and they're able to then be eligible for the genetic test. And affordability, typically, the way that this was best delivered is through a genetic test. When you're a doctor and you know exactly what you're trying to look for to understand the process for that individual, why would you need whole genome sequencing or exome sequencing? Because that just then opens and expands out the different questions that you might need to be able to then come back to the individual about. So really think that, yes, the impact on health systems is tapered in the affordability, but actually, when you look at the long-term value back for individuals, when you're looking at panel tests and arrays, they're actually not quite affordable. So in summary, on the clinical side, we've found it scoring very high in actionability and medium for accessibility, affordability. Next, when we looked at the direct-to-consumer model, this is where all reins are off. Anybody can order it, and then any reports are sent straight back to the individual to do what they want with. This is best placed for the wellness space, where there could not be such an impact on someone's health, but there could be benefits to changing certain lifestyle factors that the individual has. And I think the biggest area where this is shown incredibly popular is ancestry. And it's quite easy to dismiss this as just fun, just a fun, just a recreational activity. But actually, it's incredibly important. Sometimes having the sense of belonging and people understanding where they're from can really bring that wholeness to themselves. This is something that I personally find quite interesting. So I'm a mixed race individual. And some people don't always know that mixed race people have the lowest life expectancy within the UK. And they think that this could be because of a lack of sense of belonging and higher mental health issues that are there within the population. And so this area of ancestry is incredibly important. And it is incredibly popular. Just March last year in 2025, the 4 major providers, MyHeritage, DNA Family Tree, 23andMe, and Ancestry, reported to have 53 million test kits completed by participants. Yes, there will be some duplication across this, but we're talking about just over 0.5% of the world's population would have engaged with one of these companies like Ancestry DNA. So undeniably, direct-to-consumer is accessible. Whether it's actionable, there's such a variety of different tests, whether it's be array, and there's also a lot of differences in the quality and the thresholds used in reporting. So this can lead to a variability and actionability and whether clinicians can confidently use this within the clinical setting, or patients can, or individuals can actually use this. And that can have the impact on affordability, which, yes, there's tests that can be very affordable, but this can have impact and burden on health systems. So we saw that there was this real chasm forming between these two worlds of clinical and direct-to-consumer. On clinical side, you have the action-guided clinical setting that can really add context to genetic data. And on the other side, you had direct-to-consumer, which was incredibly accessible and engaging, but there is variable actionability. So at StoreGene, we decided to build a bridge, a self-request model, where you get the best of the actionability from the clinical world and the accessibility of direct-to-consumer. And the way that this works in practice at StoreGene is individuals either signpost to us by affiliate clinicians, or they can come to us directly. They can then request to have their genome sequenced at one of our ISO-accredited laboratories, or upload their genome if they have the data available. When it's sent to our platform, we then run crucial quality checks to see if it hits 30 times coverage, and Q-thread scores over 80% of the genome, which will give us confidence that we can run any variety of assessment across all of these areas that are available in our growing library for those individuals. Those individuals then also get access to different assessments in our growing library. Yes, there's the heart health ones in familial hypercholesterolemia and polygenic risk scores, and full pharmacogenomic profile with actionable guidance on over 102 different medications. But we've also started creating a collaborative academic and industry network with gold standard assessments can be uploaded to our platform, expanding the areas that we can work in, from newborn screening, genome screening, nutrition, wellness, and we're looking into brain health, reproductive, all areas that anyone can find value. So we're working with Genomics, Precision Life to be able to upload this and then access those individuals' whole genome data at their request. And now where self-request differentiates itself from direct-to-consumer is any assessment that has been derived on our platform is always communicated back through a clinician on our clinical network. So individuals have to book an appointment to be able to discuss their genetic assessment, and that's important so they can contextualize it with their environment and their other clinical needs, and also discuss the limitations of genetics and where it may not be living up to their expectations. We see this as reducing the burden on health systems. And we have a growing clinical network across the UK, Sweden, the UAE, South Korea, so individuals can get multiple languages and different consultations to get access to their reports. So we deliver this through the Personal Genome Portal. And on the Personal Genome Portal, this portal gives the individual that transparency. It provides the information information during the consenting and onboarding process. And once it's on the service, they can manage their consent preferences. They can decide which organizations access their data, they can download their raw data and browse and request further assessments. Now we have in place an important distinction in information governance. Those individuals can always access their raw data. It's their genome. They can do what they want with it, take it off the platform, delete it, take it wherever. But if there's any interpretation and report that's been created on our platform, that needs to go through a clinical consultation before it's released back to the individual so they can contextualize it. And that's fundamental to the self-request model. Now for the Personal Genome Portal, we see this as the starting point for engagement. And this could be then integrated within mainstream apps like Patient Knows Best, DrDoctor, and even the NHS app as it starts maturing. So in summary, we decided to deliver genomics through self-requests as a route to deliver on our tenets of accessibility, actionability, and affordability. We blended that accessibility of direct-to-consumer with the deep actionability of clinical use. So by doing this, we believe we can support the national ambitions in genomic medicine and population and create an engaging, transparent, trustworthy model to enable population genetics that we have the ambition for here in the UK. If anyone would like to connect, either as an academic collaborator or a clinical partner, or even to discover the joys of self-request themselves, do get in contact with me or partner Ollie, who's our medical intern, or connect with me on LinkedIn using the QR code. Thank you very much.